Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
And here we go into C Block. Now, John, I'm going to start off with something. You brought up something, I think it was yesterday. You said yesterday or Friday, can't remember anymore. You brought up the job listing from KWMU, St. Louis Public Radio, for their...
Yes, and you can, folks who are listening can go to johncombest.com and look up the headlines for Monday, November 18th, and you can see the job listing.
I'm going to apply for that job.
You've got to. I don't know why you wouldn't, Brad. And then you could walk us through the process. I think it's actually a good idea because although you haven't managed a newsroom in a while, look at the other qualifications, Brad. I think it would be awesome to walk us through the interview process and how quickly you were told that you're not an applicant. Or that you're not, that you're not a candidate. I think it'd be great to hear their reasoning of why they can't have another white male, even one who's, of advanced age in the newsroom.
Once upon some point in time, I don't know if I ever told you the story or not. You'd get mad at me because I tell the same stories over again. But I've never told the story before, and I'm going to tell the story sometime. Me being rejected by the St. Louis University Law School. You ever heard that story?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, it's a great story, which is actually very funny. But anyway, going back to this, so. I have to look at your that was yesterday's John Combest, right?
Yeah.
Did it have a link where you can actually, is it apply online kind of deal or something like that?
Yeah. Let me bring it up right now, actually.
Okay.
As I bring it up, excuse me. And what I like to do is, on occasion, I'll go through, and I don't do it too often for positions that aren't noteworthy. But journalismjobs.com is a really good hub for folks, and you can sort by location. So I usually sort by Missouri. And the application, and it just says that you can apply to, you should contact the interim news director, Brian Heffernan. And then for questions about the application process, there's a chick either a chick or a dude named Jess Luther, who's the chief of staff that you can ask questions about. Yeah.
And chief of staff at KWMU, that's the person?
Yeah, well, I mean, they were going to call it staff secretary, but then you'd get on the air and insult the person that got the job say, I thought that was beneath them.
How many levels of organization do they have there? I mean, it's to the point where, most of the radio stations have gotten real flat. You have a general manager and sales manager and program director, and that's pretty much it. There's no levels like that. But anyway.
Yeah, but you figure that everybody has a layer above them for DEI training. Like everybody has their own personal DEI trainer.
I can't say who this is, and I won't, but it's interesting because they heard us talking about Boeing dropping the DEI program. There's a new CEO, and he's saying, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to get back to making planes and making a profit. I'm sort of synopsizing his words, but that's essentially, wouldn't you agree, that's pretty much what he was saying?
That's exactly it. Right?
Enough of this DEI stuff. Okay, a listener to the show who's very, 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 very plugged in has told me that the problem is, or not the problem, this person, he essentially said that this is pretty much all of corporate America, and that it's being done very quietly.
Yeah, I believe it's quiet.
Right?
Yeah, I believe it.
Because they don't want to ruffle the feathers of the DEI people, and maybe it's one of these things where we're seeing these crazy, weird shifts since the election. And especially where the story that we didn't touch on yesterday about the Friday visit, who Donald Trump saw 8 o'clock on Friday morning, I think it was 8 o'clock on Friday morning or sometime on Friday morning.
Oh, that show that I don't watch, the Morning Joe show, or what's it called?
Did you hear this crazy story?
Yeah, that they decided that, they've... So as I understand it, and who are they? Micah and I don't watch it.
Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, who used to be a Republican. Matter of fact,
he was a Republican congressman from Pennsylvania. I never knew who that chick was. But so their thing was they're super critical of Donald Trump, and now he gets elected, as I understand it, and then they say, well, we're gonna, speak truth to power, and we're gonna go have a conversation with him. Is that right?
Yes. And what's interesting, the story I read yesterday was they're now being given the cold shoulder by most of the staff at MSNBC because how dare them go talk to Donald Trump? I mean,
Yeah.
what is wrong with our country? We've become incredibly tribal. And then there's another thing. Here, I put this on my list of stuff to talk about this morning. And by the way, Shelley, thank you for telling me another thing's broken this morning. All I do is fix stuff.
The streaming's down, right?
Yeah, God.
Yeah, I heard that, but we weren't going to bring it up to you, Brad.
Oh, man. Okay, hold on a minute.
You've got enough going on today. By the way, how can you possibly deliver bad news to a man who hasn't even had his Little Debbie's yet?
I haven't had my Little Debbie's yet. No,
That's what I'm saying. I know. And I don't want to even bring up how delicious it would be and how usually at this point you've had their delicious sugary goodness in your bloodstream and you're deprived of that now, Brad. I'm not going to talk about that.
You're so nice. Okay, here's the headline. Katie Couric rips Kamala Harris for word salad responses in campaign interviews. And she says, at one point in time, this is an interview she had, answer the GD question. Okay, now, here's what's interesting. Do you think that 4 weeks ago that Katie Couric would come out and said,
of course not. But now, pause, Brad. It's also common, I think, to give a little bit, let's give them an inch, the other side an inch here, and that if Donald Trump had lost, and had lost by a huge margin, there would be Republicans who were pro-Trump who would come out and criticize what the campaign did and say, hey, I know better than the campaign, and the campaign should have done this. So Republicans do the same thing after their candidates lose. But your point, though, is that a Katie Couric type would never dare criticize anything about Kamala Harris during the campaign. You're right about that.
And well, the article, by the way, I just checked something. The bjshow.co site is down, but Westplex Talk is up, and you can get to the streaming by going to westplextalk.com. Matter of fact, I put a new link at the very top of the page, so you can't miss it. It says Listen Live right there at the top of the page. And here, let me send this to this person who's complaining the streaming's not working, and I send this out to this person that's saying the streaming's not working, so I'll give them this. Okay. The Katie Couric thing, she goes on, and it's a pretty interesting interview. She talks about the fact that and this is you and I talked about this, and it's so fascinating to me because of the fact that it seems like now hindsight's always 20/20. She says, and this is Katie Couric, she says she thought Kamala Harris's best interview was with Brett Baier at Fox News because he gave her tough questions. And she's saying that because everybody, almost the entire press, gave her all these softballs, she wasn't really being tried. It's, think about it. It's like a major league pitcher who, that somebody's throwing batting practice to him, or a major league batter, and it's like a Albert Pujols. And they're throwing 50-mile-an-hour, pitches right in the strike zone.
Right down the middle.
Right, belt high, 50-mile-an-hour pitches. Okay, he's going to tag every one of them and put them in the seats, right?
Yeah.
But if you challenge him and you start throwing wicked curveballs and change-ups and, and two-seam fastballs and all sorts of crazy stuff like that, it makes him a better hitter because he's addressing himself. And that's true of everything. And it's to the point where it's like going to the gym, the old axiom is no pain, no gain. If you're not hurting, you're not gaining strength. You're not gaining flexibility and things like that. So Katie goes into this whole thing about how terrible it was. Now, the crazy thing about this was, and you already answered the question, I asked it once, why didn't someone approach the campaign and say, hey, you know what? You're going with all these easy interviews and these people that are going to throw you all the nice, easy questions. Wrong. You need to get out there and you need to get somebody who's going to eviscerate you. Somebody who's going to, bring out their hardball questions and throw them at your head. You know what I mean? So to speak, use the baseball analogies. And once again, that's why Trump is so good, because Trump never gets softball questions.
You're exactly right. And that forces them to be better. Now, Brad, I would say, though, excuse me, there's a whole lot of things that we don't see in the course of a campaign. And for all we know, there were a lot of interactions like Quentin Lucas talked about with our friend Pete Mundo. Quentin Lucas says that he went to the Harris Walls campaign and said, Tim, and told Tim Walz, come to a Chiefs game, like be a regular guy. And then Tim Walz goes and plays video games on Twitch. Like I think there were people there were Democrats that delivered that message, and the campaign leadership chose to disregard.
Well, the other thing let me one more thing in this Katie Couric interview. It was between Katie Couric and Jen Psaki, who's the old press secretary from the beginning of the Biden years. Remember, we used to call her Circle Back Psaki. Remember
Circle
that?
back. Let me circle back.
Circle back. No matter what you ask, let me circle back to you and I'll get back to you. Okay. And she says, Psaki, who served as Biden's White House. Come on. I hit the wrong thing and my screen disappeared. Damn it. Hold on a minute. Hoover Dam. That's what I said. Hoover Dam it.
Hoover Dam it.
Hoover Dam it. Okay,
Lake Mead Dam it. Brad, did you know while you're fixing that, did you know that a man once told me that the levels at Lake Mead are going higher? Now, from what I've seen of videos and pictures online, Havasu is where you get the real buoyancy. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
I hear you, and you're making fun of me because I know the lake levels at Lake Mead. Okay, she says, if she asked about changing the Supreme Court at that CNN town hall, she had an opportunity to talk about ethics and what Alito and Clarence Thomas were doing, and she answered in one sentence and then went on to something that had nothing to do with the question. Couric said, people notice that, and it's and this is where she says, this is Katie Couric, answer the GD question, although she didn't say GD.
Yes.
She then pivoted to Harris's now infamous comments on The View, where she was asked about what she would do differently from President Biden. And you remember that one? She says, nothing. That's what she said.
Yeah, what a great answer.
Right. Hey, everything's fine.
She says, everything sucks. We need to get better. What would you do different? Nothing.
Yes. That would be like that would be like if you ran a company and you had 5 departments in the company and 4 of the departments were doing great and one of them was just falling on his face, and you bring in the manager of that department. You say, hey man, these other 4 departments are doing great. Your department's really sucking air. What are you going to do about it? Well, nothing. Everything's fine. Dude, you're fired.
Are you taking notes for this, Brad, for your St. Louis Public Radio job interview? I hope you're asked, what would you do differently as you manage these 3 teams of 4 people? What would you do differently? You should say nothing. You should say, I would just speak more. I would encourage them to speak more softly.
Oh, God, don't get me going on that. Okay. You know what? I just found in my pocket. Never mind. Okay. I'm all over the place this morning. I'm distracted by the fact that I've got technical difficulties coming out my ears. Okay. The interesting thing was, in another interview I read, and it talked about this behind the scenes stuff, the intrigue, the behind the palace walls, that Nancy Pelosi and the other Democrats who ultimately went to Biden and said, Joe, you got to step down. You got to move on. And he finally acquiesced to that and said, okay, fine. And they told him, this is what I read, they told him they were going to have a very quick primary, but 10 minutes after he sent out his tweet that he was stepping down as the presidential candidate, he called up Kamala and says, girl, you're it. Not in so many words, to essentially screw the Democrats to the point where then, by essentially him anointing her as his, the person
heir apparent,
that he screwed the Democrats because they didn't want her. Because remember they talked about, for a long time, people going oh my God, she's got all these things. She can't talk. She's embarrassing, blah, 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 blah. I'm going God, this is good old Joe, man. Good old lunchbox Joe, man. He plays.
Yeah. And then he told her that if anybody disagreed with her, to take him out back and kick him in the bleep.
Right.
Punch him in the bleep.
And if that didn't work, to, rub the hair on his legs because he has hairy legs. Remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, now, here's one other one. Okay, I saw this and I thought to myself, I don't believe this is a real story. I've checked it out and it's true, okay? Here's the headline for this one. This is a non-political story. This is a funny story. Person in bear costume attacks luxury cars and insurance scam, California insurers say. Have you heard this story?
No, but this is brilliant. I already love it.
Here's the first paragraph. 4 Los Angeles residents stand accused of defrauding insurance companies when they claimed a bear broke into their luxury cars and tore up the interior, but investigators determined the wild animal was a human in costume. In what was aptly called Operation Bear Claw, the California Insurance Department said that it's interesting because I mentioned the fact that 2 of them are Armenian, because one's Ruben Tamarasian and the other one is they're all Armenian. Okay, the other one's Arat Cherkanian, and essentially they say they're facing charges of insurance and fraud. A group allegedly provided insurance companies with the surveillance video taken in January in Lake Arrowhead and San Bernardino Mountains that allegedly showed a bear moving inside a Rolls-Royce and 2 Mercedes vehicles. So these are high-end vehicles. So they showed the video to the insurance company. Hey, this bear got in our cars and tore the interiors up. Okay, originally the insurance company settled for it was like a lot of money. I think
my God.
I think it was like it was like 130,000. Oh no, here we go. The insurance companies were allegedly defrauded to the tune of $141,839 because they tore it up. Now get this. And it was a 2015 Mercedes. These ads keep popping up and moving my screen around. Don't you hate it when that happens? A 2015 Mercedes, a 2022 Mercedes E350, and a Rolls-Royce and another car. Okay. Now get this. To make sure the bear seen in the video was not, in fact, the wild animal, the CDI brought in a biologist from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to review the 3 videos. They bring in a biologist. The biologist concluded someone wearing a bear suit, the department said. The bear costume was found during a search of the suspect's home. So they had...
Unbelievable.
And there's a picture of the bear costume. And what's interesting is they have these they have like the bear claws, like the real, like the bear claws, but as an extension of their bear claws, they have this thing that looks like these long tooth, almost like a small pitchfork kind of thing that they stuck on the bear claw on the underside of the bear claw. So it looked like they were real bear claws, but they weren't, and underneath they had like these metal things that look like I said, like these multi-pronged pitchfork things. So this guy in a bear costume gets in these cars and starts ripping up the interior, and they get $141,000 in insurance settlement. God,
but don't you think, Brad? I mean, if you were to commit a crime, you would think, okay, like. Wouldn't you go one layer deeper instead of being like, okay, we'll have a guy in a bear suit attack the car and then record it? Like, the first thing you would think is, okay, what could make this look legitimate? Oh, I know. Don't have somebody in like a reddish brown suit from Goodwill or a costume shop when actually all the bears around here are whatever color. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, the first thing you should think is like, okay, what are actual size of real bears? What color are they? What do their claws look like? What kind of damage do they do? You get what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't you go a second layer deeper if you're committing a crime?
Well, I agree with you. Now, there's a picture. The California Department of Insurance has a picture of the bear costume that when they raided the house, and it looks pretty good. But still, let's be honest. How many times have you seen people in Halloween dressed in costumes, like, animal costumes, and you go like, oh my God, that's a real antelope, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Normally you can spot that a mile away. You know what I'm saying?
I do know. Yeah. And so don't you think, I mean, although it's creative, if you just think of the hours that they put into planning this and the risks they took, if they took that and, went to a state, let's say, I don't know, California, where the minimum wage is $3,000 an hour, like they would have been better stocking shelves at Home Depot than trying to create this crime.
Hold on, I'm going to clear my voice here. I'll tell you an interesting story. At least you may find it interesting. Okay, one of the problems that radio stations had for a while, and it's sort of gone by the wayside, when copper hit a very high value, this happened at cell sites as well too. These copper thieves would break into cellular cell sites and radio station transmitter sites, and they would dig up or strip the copper out, and especially the AM stations had a lot of copper ground strap. And the one engineer figured that when he replaced all the copper that had been stolen, he figured out, he weighed it all and replaced the copper and weighed it and came up with a amount of poundage that he had. And he contacted the local recycling place and said, okay, how much is X amount of copper worth? And they told him like whatever it was. And he figured it probably took him 3 or 4 hours to pull all this copper out of the ground. He divided one by the other and he figured out they made $8 an hour. He said,
yeah, exactly. And then the risk of electrocution.
Right.
Like, you're an expert on this, Brad. Like,
Right.
And not only are you committing a crime, but let's put morality aside. Like, not only you get paid so little per hour, but the risks involved in this, but that will show what like methamphetamines will do to somebody's brain. Right?
I'm telling you. Okay, here we go again. No commercials. So, John, we got to go to segment 3, block 3, or block C. God, man, my mind's a mess this morning.
It's okay, Brad. Hey, you know what? You get your battery recharged at the 1 year mark. So tomorrow we're going to plug you into that O'Fallon solar farm and you're going to be as good as new.
I want to be plugged into the new Florence O'Fallon the new Florence solar park. That's the one I want. Okay, so we're going to start over again. Here we go.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?